It's 3:47 in the morning. Manila, Tuesday. Your phone buzzes. Not a call. An emergency alert. You check the news, every channel, same headline. And in that moment, everything changes. Not just for Taiwan, for you. Because you're 200 kilometers away. That's the distance from Manila to Baguio. A missile launched from mainland China takes 12 minutes to reach Taiwan. It passes through Philippine airspace in 6. And you're hosting American military bases on Luzon, right next to the war zone. This is not a prediction. This is an analysis based on Chinese military doctrine, Philippines' strategic vulnerabilities, and the geographic reality no one can change. Here's what actually happens, not the surface story, the real cascade. Okay, so here's what everyone sees. The obvious stuff. China invades Taiwan. The world freaks out. Emergency UN Security Council meeting. US condemns the action. Japan raises defense readiness. Stock markets crash. That's the headline version, the thing you can read in 30 seconds. But here's what that misses. The Philippines isn't watching this from a distance. You're inside the blast radius, geographically, militarily, economically. And in the first 72 hours, 4 things cascade through your country. Fast. Let me walk you through each one. Because this is where it gets real. The Philippines becomes a target without firing a single shot. Here's how first. Military impact, and I need you to understand something. The Philippines isn't part of this war. You're not invading Taiwan. You're not fighting China. But geography doesn't care about neutrality. Look at this. China launches an invasion from its eastern coast. Where does it go? Over the Taiwan Strait. Some missiles, some aircraft, some naval movements go south of Taiwan. That means they're passing through or right next to Philippine airspace. The northern tip of Luzon is 200 kilometers from Taiwan. Patani's even closer. Now add this. The Philippines hosts 9 EDCA sites, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement locations. American forces operate from these bases. 3 of them are in northern Luzon. Basa Air Base in Pampanga, Fort Magsaysay in Nueva Ecija, Lalo Airport in Cagayan. The U.S. uses these for logistics, reconnaissance, rapid response. They're watching everything China does in the South China Sea and around Taiwan. So here's China's calculation. If the U.S. is going to interfere in a Taiwan invasion, some of that interference comes from Philippine bases, which means those bases become targets. Not immediately, not in R1, but they're in the target deck. China's DF-26 missiles can hit Luzon from the mainland in 15 minutes. They're designed to take out air bases, radar installations, command centers. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The Philippines can't stop them. Philippine air defense is designed for territorial patrol, not ballistic missile interception. You don't have the systems. The U.S. could deploy Patriot or THAAD systems to protect EDCA sites. But that takes time, and it makes those locations even bigger targets. So here's the dilemma. EDCA sites give the Philippines some security through U.S. presence. But in a Taiwan war, they make you a target. And within the first 72 hours, the Philippine government has to decide. Do you let the U.S. operate from those bases? Do you maintain neutrality and ground U.S. operations? Because China will make that demand immediately, through diplomatic channels and probably through military signaling. Stay out of this, or you're in it. Meanwhile, civilian airspace over Luzon gets shut down. No flights in or out. Nye closes, Clark closes. Cebu might stay open, but routes are disrupted. Tourism stops. Business travel stops. Cargo flights get rerouted. Your northern regions are in a no-fly zone. And if you're a fisherman operating in waters between Luzon and Taiwan, you're told to get out now, because that area becomes a military zone. The Philippine Navy and Coast Guard do what they can. But realistically, you're watching from the sidelines of a fight between militaries 50 times your size. So in 72 hours, militarily, airspace closed or heavily restricted EDCA sites become potential targets. Philippine government forced to choose between U.S. alliance and Chinese pressure. Northern Luzon effectively in a conflict zone. Zero ability to control what happens in your immediate region. And that's just the military layer. Now let's talk about what that does to your economy. The Philippine economy doesn't collapse because of bombs. It collapses because of geography. Okay, economic impact. And this one sneaks up on people, because when you hear war, you think destruction. Bombs, not infrastructure damage. But the Philippines gets hit economically before a single missile lands on Philippine soil. Here's how. The Taiwan Strait is one of the most important shipping choke points on Earth. 48% of global container ships pass through here. Not just any cargo, high-value electronics, semiconductors, manufacturing components that feed global supply chains. China invades Taiwan. That strait closes immediately. No commercial shipping allowed in a war zone. So ships reroute south, around the Philippines, through the Luzon Strait, through Indonesian waters. That adds 3 to 7 days to every voyage. Fuel costs spike. Insurance rates go insane. Shipping companies start canceling routes that aren't profitable anymore. And here's where the Philippines feels it. Your ports rely on transshipment. Cargo comes through Manila, gets redistributed regionally. You're a logistics hub. But if shipping routes are chaos and insurance is unaffordable, container traffic through Philippine ports drops. Fast. Port workers, logistics companies. Trucking, warehousing. All of it connected to shipping volume. And volume just crashed. Then there's semiconductors. Taiwan makes 60% of the world's semiconductors. 90% of the most advanced chips. The Philippines has a growing electronics manufacturing sector. You assemble components. Those components come from Taiwan. Taiwan goes to war. Supply chain freezes. Philippine factories can't get parts. Production stops. Workers get sent home. But it's not just the Philippines. The entire global electronics industry seizes up. Phones, computers. Cars, medical devices. Everything uses Taiwanese chips. Prices explode, availability crashes, and the Philippines, being import-dependent for a lot of electronics, feels that immediately. Then there's food. The Philippines imports rice, wheat, dairy, meat. A lot of it comes through shipping routes that just became war zones or got massively disrupted. Within 72 hours, you're not seeing empty shelves yet. But prices start climbing. Importers panic buy. Hoarding begins. Energy. The Philippines imports 96% of its crude oil. Most of that comes through the South China Sea. War breaks out. Tanker insurance goes through the roof. Some companies refuse to sail through potential conflict zones. Fuel prices in the Philippines spike. Not because of shortages yet, because of fear and risk premiums. And here's one people forget. Remittances. $36 billion a year sent home by OFWs. 10% of GDP. A lot of OFWs work in Taiwan, more work in China. Some work in Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, all places immediately affected by this war. Evacuations begin. Filipinos in Taiwan get pulled out. Workers in China face uncertainty. Remittance flows get disrupted. And back home, families depending on those monthly transfers. They're suddenly in crisis. Philippine Stock Exchange crashes, investors flee emerging markets. Foreign capital pulls out. Peso weakens against the dollar. None of this is bombs dropping. This is just geography and dependence, and being in the wrong place when the global economy fractures. The refugee crisis hits the Philippines before anyone talks about it internationally. All right, humanitarian impact, and this is where it gets personal. Real people, real consequences. Taiwan has 24 million people. If China invades, some of them run. Not everyone, but enough. Where do they run? The closest land that's not China, northern Philippines. Batanes, Cagayan Coast. You're right there. In the first 72 hours, you're not seeing massive organized evacuations yet. But small boats start showing up. Private vessels, fishing boats. People with money who chartered passage. They land in Batanes, maybe Cagayan. Local communities have no infrastructure for this. No refugee processing, no shelters set up. The Philippine government is scrambling. Do you accept them? Do you turn them away? Do you have legal authority to make that call in the middle of an active war? International law says you have to rescue people in distress at sea. but you don't have to grant them permanent asylum. So you set up temporary shelters, schools, gymnasiums, anywhere with space. And you're doing this while your own northern communities are under airspace closure and economic stress. Then there's Filipinos in Taiwan. About 150,000 to 200,000 OFWs live and work there. The Philippine government has to evacuate them. But how? Airspace is closed. Sea routes are dangerous, and you're trying to pull people out of an active war zone. In 72 hours, you're organizing emergency repatriation, coordinating with whatever international flights are still operating, trying to get Filipinos out through southern Taiwan ports, through third countries. Back home, families are panicking. No communication, can't reach loved ones, don't know if they're safe. And it's not just Taiwan. OFWs in Hong Kong feel the instability. Those in Japan and South Korea are in countries now on high military alert. The entire region is tense, and Filipinos are scattered across all of it. Meanwhile, northern Luzon is dealing with its own crisis. Fishermen can't go out. Farmers near EDCA sites are being told to evacuate if things escalate. Local economies freeze. Some families don't wait for government orders. They pack up and move south. Internal displacement, away from Luzon, toward Visayas or Mindanao, which puts strain on cities like Cebu, Davao. Housing. Food, jobs. Social services, and if casualties start happening, even accidentally, a stray missile, a naval incident, the Philippine medical system isn't built for mass casualty war trauma. You have good doctors, but limited equipment, limited surge capacity. If hundreds of wounded need treatment, you're overwhelmed. The Philippines has 72 hours to make a choice that defines the next decade. There are no good options. Political impact. This is the big one, because everything else, military, economic, humanitarian, it's all creating pressure on one question. What does the Philippines do? And you've got two paths, both bad. Path one, you honor the Mutual Defense Treaty with the US. You allow American forces to operate from EDCA sites. You provide logistics support. You're an active ally. Benefits? The US protects you. Article 4 of the MDT says an attack on Philippine forces triggers US response. You get security. You get military aid. You're on the winning side if the US prevails. Costs? China sees you as an enemy combatant. You become a legitimate target. Chinese missiles can hit EDCA sites. Your economy, already strained, faces active Chinese economic punishment. Trade restrictions, investment freeze, cyber attacks. And in the South China Sea, where you have territorial disputes with China, you lose any chance of negotiation. China just takes what it wants. Path 2. You declare neutrality. You tell the US they can't use EDCA sites for Taiwan operations. You stay out of it. Benefits? You avoid direct Chinese retaliation. You keep trade flowing. You're not a target. You can claim non-belligerent status and try to negotiate post-war. Costs? The US sees you as unreliable. The alliance is damaged, maybe permanently. Future US support, military, economic, political, is no longer guaranteed. You didn't choose this position. But here's what it actually means. Okay, let's be honest about where the Philippines actually is. You didn't choose to be 200 kilometers from Taiwan. You didn't choose to be in the South China Sea. You didn't choose to be on the doorstep of great power competition. You didn't choose the colonial history that led to the US alliance, or the economic dependence on China that developed over the last 20 years. But here you are. Militarily, the Philippines cannot defend itself against a major power. Not China, not even mid-tier regional powers. The AFP is designed for internal security and territorial patrol, not high-intensity state conflict. Economically, China is your largest trading partner. 21% of Philippine imports come from China. 15% of exports go to China. But security-wise, you depend on the United States. The Mutual Defense Treaty, EDCA. The implicit guarantee that if things go bad, America has your back. So you're economically dependent on China, militarily dependent on America, and geographically trapped between them. A Taiwan war collapses that contradiction. You can't stay economically tied to China while militarily allied with the US in an active war. So if China invades Taiwan, What happens to the Philippines in the first 72 hours? Your airspace closes, your economy starts cracking, refugees start arriving, your government faces an impossible choice. And ordinary Filipinos are trying to navigate it all with incomplete information and rising fear. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the strategic reality of living 200 kilometers from a potential war zone. The Philippines has survived wars before. World War II occupations, coups, disasters. But this would be different. Because it's not about whether the Philippines can endure. It's about what position you're in when it's over. If China wins and the Philippines sided with the US, you're isolated in a Chinese-dominated region. If the US wins and the Philippines stayed neutral, your security guarantee is gone. If the war drags on for months, your economy collapses regardless of what side you chose. There are no good outcomes for the Philippines in a Taiwan war, only different versions of bad. So what does this mean right now, today, when there is no war? It means the Philippines should be reducing vulnerabilities, diversifying trade, strengthening domestic resilience, building regional partnerships that don't depend on great powers, and recognizing that some things you can't change. Geography, history, the fact that you're caught between two giants. You didn't choose this position, but you're in it. And understanding what happens in the first 72 hours of a Taiwan invasion isn't about panic. It's about knowing the reality, so you can make better decisions before it happens. Subscribe to Global Pulse for honest analysis on what shapes your future.